To this special edition of Patriots Pulse. I'm your host, John Sirenitas, and I'm joined as usual by my partner, John Lyons. And we normally wouldn't be coming to you at 12:38 on a Sunday, but we are today because, of course, the news broke a couple of hours ago that the New England Patriots are going to hire Mike Vrabel as the new head football coach. They're going to introduce him in a press conference that is scheduled for tomorrow at noon. And, John, first things first, great to see you, man. I know you were on the air at EEI. There was a quick pivot there. We ended up deciding to do our own thing after you got off the air there, and we want to break it down. And as always, we invite you guys to join the conversation. We're going to be on for about a half hour, so feel free to jump on and share your thoughts. But first things first, great to see you, my friend. And second of all, the worst-kept secret in football is now reality.
Yeah, John, you hit the nail on the head. I thought we were going to finally have a Sunday off from Patriots Pulse, and of course, they hire Mike Vrabel around, 10:30, 10:45 a.m. this morning. I think I agree with you, right? Worst kept secret in football. Vrabel didn't even interview for the Raiders job because he knew he was going to get this one. I bet you in the back of his mind, Robert Kraft had Mike Vrabel there for a year now. I mean, it was a year ago yesterday, Bill Belichick got fired, January 11th. And I bet you Robert Kraft in the back of his mind even then was like, well, I believe in Gerard Mayo, but if Gerard Mayo fails, Mike Vrabel's the guy. And I think that's also part of the reason this year you saw Mike Vrabel be a consultant for the Browns, but did not take a coordinator job anywhere, did not take a head coach job anywhere, because he probably looked at it and said, got a bunch of rookies on that Patriots coaching staff, including the head coach. You have a bad roster. This could go south, and if it does, it's going to be my job. So, yeah, I think worst kept secret in football. But that being said, I think you could probably agree this is a really, really good hire for the Patriots.
It's a tremendous hire. And look, I've seen a lot of people on social media talk about the process or the lack thereof. I think one of the things people need to understand, John, and I think they lose sight of this sometimes, is these are private companies. He's the owner. Other than adhering to the Rooney Rule, which they did, and whether you like the way they did it or not is a whole separate issue. But other than adhering to the Rooney Rule, he can hire who he wants when he wants. And at the end of the day, okay, so they didn't go through enough of a process, that the process was fake, that they interviewed Ben Johnson to placate the fan base. Okay, even if that's true, the bottom line is he's the owner. He can do that. He can do whatever he wants in this process as long as he interviews the requisite number of minority candidates to meet the Rooney Rule. He could have hired Vrabel yesterday. He could have hired him Friday if he wanted to. Again, you don't have to like the process. You don't have to agree with it. But the bottom line is he's a good hire. He's exactly what they need right now. And I look at it like this, John. When you look at where this team was last year, they were undisciplined, okay? Too many penalties, undisciplined play on defense, too many breakdowns. I think he fixes all of that. Offensively, really didn't have an identity going into the season. We felt that they needed to be able to run the football to have any kind of consistent success. Couldn't do it consistently. That becomes a priority now. I think they're going to continue to develop Drake May. I do have some concerns about his offensive philosophy in regards to Drake May. We'll get to those, and I'll talk about those later on anyfootballjournal.com as well. But the bottom line here is last year you hired Gerard Mayo, hell of a player for the Patriots. He had credibility with the players, didn't have that credibility as a coach. Now you hire a guy, Mike Vrabel, who not only has the credibility as a player, three-time Super Bowl champion, but more importantly, he has credibility as a coach. Led the Tennessee Titans in 2020 to the AFC Championship game. He knows what he's doing. He knows how he wants to play. He's going to place expectations on this football team. He's going to put good pressure on his coaches and the players, and he's going to squeeze out the people that don't want to buy in. He's not afraid to do that. I thought Teddy Bruschi said it best this morning on ESPN's NFL Countdown when he compared him to Bill Parcells. He's not going to be Bill Belichick, but this is probably the closest thing we're going to get to Bill Parcells in 2025.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because that quote stood out to me as well, because I feel like one of the expectations or the hopes of Gerard Mayo was you'll have some of the structure Bill Belichick had, but a kind of different vibe, a little more approachable, relaxed head coach. And it just went way too far in the other direction. You and I talked about this in the spring. There was a lot of, hey, we're going to do the opposite of a bunch of things that helped us win 6 Super Bowls.
Which ended up blowing up in their face.
Yeah.
Let's be real.
Yeah, 100%. And they just wanted to do the opposite of everything Bill did. And it's like, okay, maybe some of the things Bill did needed to change, And maybe some of them needed to be the opposite, but some of them also helped you win games, right? So I think Vrabel will strike that balance where he'll be a little bit more approachable to some of the younger guys than maybe Bill was in his last few years, especially, but he'll have that consistency, that discipline. When you look at those Tennessee teams, including that one that went to the AFC Championship game, those were teams that had some real talent. Derrick Henry, all pro, A.J. Brown, all pro level player, but they played up to and above their capabilities the majority of games they played in. And I think that's a testament to Vrabel. That's a testament to the accountability level. And that's what you want to see, right? Okay, you're not going to get the exact same thing you got with Bill Belichick. There probably should be some differences, but not too many differences to the point where you're forgetting about some of the things that helped you win. And I think Vrabel's a guy with that Parcells comparison sticking out that can really strike that balance well.
Yeah, and let's not forget, he didn't coach for Belichick, which I think also positions him uniquely from the standpoint of he's not a Belichick guy. He went off and did his own thing. He coached in college, coached in the NFL. He did coach under Bill O'Brien in Houston, but he went off and did his own thing. So while it's easy to point to this and say, well, it's another Belichick guy, Kraft is only going to hire people he knows. He can't let it go, blah, blah, blah. In theory, Mike Vrabel never coached for Belichick. He played for Belichick, and to your point, there'll be a lot of those Belichick elements in place there when it comes to the program. But I think bottom line, this is going to be his football team. It's going to have its own identity here. This is not going to be a Bill Belichick football team. He's not going to be Bill Belichick with the media. I do think he'll be a little bit more open and more transparent. Although that being said, as you alluded to, I think this collaboration stuff, and I think this 100% transparency and be buddy with the media and be nice with the fans, I think that's going to go out the window here. I don't think. Let's put it this way: it could be wrong here, but I don't think we're going to have another beer and wine and cheese social to introduce Vrabel and his staff. Something tells me that's not happening, and I think the way he deals with the media is going to be totally different. And I know people in the media are prepared for that. It's not, I mean, this is a veteran media group here that have been covering this team for a long time. Vrabel's not going to be something they haven't seen before, especially covering Belichick all those years. But I do think it's going to be a different vibe. It's going to be a much different vibe. Now, what I'm interested to see is how does he play philosophically speaking? When you look at his teams in Tennessee, John, they were a ground and pound, featured Derrick Henry, play action, get your one-on-ones on the perimeter with A.J. Brown, push the ball vertically, but they wanted to play tough physical football, which, look, that fits up here. I mean, there's snow on the ground on January 12th. You need to play that way up here, especially after Thanksgiving. So is he going to play that same way? Is he going to tweak it to fit some of Drake May's skill set, which I know people have had their concerns about whether or not his philosophy and the way he wants to play offensively is going to work for Drake May? Obviously, a lot of this will depend on who he hires as his offensive coordinator and his position coaches. But I'm curious for your take here in regards to how you think they're going to play. Do you think he's going to carry over that inside-out philosophy where you build your roster inside out and you play tough physical football based in the running game?
Yeah, I think he will, but I don't know if he'll go to the extent that he did in Tennessee because you had Derrick Henry, best running back in the NFL. I think the best running back of the 21st century. So
yeah, first
you don't have
Hall of Famer all day.
Yeah, right. So you don't have that guy. I still think he's going to be a run-first offense, and I think that's going to be his way, whether they upgrade the running back position, whether it's exactly the same as it is now. But let's not forget, Ryan Tannehill had his best seasons as a pro under Mike Vrabel working with Arthur Smith. And what I find interesting about Vrabel, and you kind of hit the nail on the head, he played for Belichick, but he's coached with a lot of different people. You look at, like, he works, it was for Bill O'Brien in Houston, so there's that Patriots-esque offensive system there. But then in Tennessee, he works with Matt LaFleur and Arthur Smith, different systems than what Bill O'Brien would have been using in Houston. So he's got exposure to different kinds of systems. He obviously did a good job hiring offensive coordinators back-to-back in LaFleur and Smith. And I know things went down after that. I think part of it is A.J. Brown got traded. Ryan Tannehill got exposed a little bit. I'm not absolving Vrabel completely, but I think that had more to do with it. And you saw
I also think he ruffled ownership's feathers there a little bit. And
I definitely think he did.
That's going to be the difference here. Kraft admires him. He loves him. I mean, you saw how much he was gloating over him last year when he got into the Patriots Hall of Fame. That's not going to be an issue here. I think Kraft is going to give him more leeway in regards to the final 53 and having a say in personnel. I don't think he's let's put it this way. I think he's built to handle the media in this market, and I don't think the issues that Amy Adams Strunk had with him in Tennessee are going to be an issue here, provided he wins, of course.
Yeah, and I would agree. I don't think they're going to have the same friction with ownership here that he had in Tennessee. And on the personnel stuff, this is kind of what I envision. He's never, and no one is ever, going to have as much power as Belichick did, but he's going to have a heck of a lot more power than Gerard Mayo did.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to have, like, I could see him going to, and there's actually early reports out that Ryan Cowden, who was the interim GM in 2022 with the Titans, worked with him for several years in Tennessee, is going to be coming to the Patriots with Vrabel. So I could see him looking at Cowden, looking at maybe Elliott Wolf, depending on that relationship, and saying, hey, I don't care what receiver you specifically get, but I want these measurables, or I want this and this. And maybe they can worry about the specific player, but it fits the mold of a guy he wants. Or if there's a guy on the team, like the A.J. Brown situation in Tennessee, that he wants to keep around no matter what, he goes to them and says, hey, don't trade this guy, or hey, find a way to work out an extension with this guy. And those can maybe be the specific guys. So I think it'll be kind of a middle ground between Mayo, who it felt like had no power in the personnel department, and Belichick, who had all of it. I could see it being kind of in the middle ground, never as much as Belichick, but a heck of a lot more than Mayo.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting in that regard, too. What is the structure here? Because I think it's going to be very similar to what you have in San Francisco with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, where I think whoever is the leading figure in that front office will be in charge of player acquisition. But when it comes to the final 53, I think Vrabel will have the final say as to who makes his team and who comes up and down from the practice squad on a week-to-week basis. That I just get the sense that he doesn't take this job if the money's not right and he doesn't have some personnel control. He had all the leverage here, John. I mean, he could have gone to the Jets. He could have entertained the Raiders. He could have he interviewed with the Bears.
Yeah.
Right. He had other options. And so, yes, even though he wanted this job, if he didn't get what he wanted from a financial personnel control standpoint, he doesn't take this job. Now, I do think that ultimately the Patriots were the job he wanted. And why wouldn't you? You've got a potential franchise quarterback in Drake May. You're going to have north of $130 million in cap space to spend. All of a sudden now the Patriots do become more appealing for guys around the league. And this is where who is your head football coach matters in football. They become more appealing now. Now, I still think you're going to have to overpay to get some guys here because of the fact that there's still a franchise that hasn't had recent success, taxes, quality of life up here with the weather and everything else. Guys that grew up in the South don't necessarily want to be looking out the window and seeing 35 degrees and snow on the ground. That being said, again, I don't think he comes here if he doesn't have a say in personnel. He doesn't get the money he wants, but also he doesn't get to handpick someone like Cowden who can be in that front office. And that dynamic will be pretty interesting to watch here in the coming weeks and months as we get closer to the NFL draft, because who's going to be the primary decision maker in that front office? I still think you're going to see some changes with this Patriots front office in the coming days, weeks, and months, if not before the draft, certainly after the draft. I think some familiar names that are there now may not be there come April 28th, 29th.
Yeah, and you look at Ryan Cowden, this is just one example, but I mean, Elliott Wolf's title is Executive Vice President of Player Personnel. Well, in Tennessee, he was the Vice President of Player Personnel for 5 years. So he's done that job longer than Elliott Wolf has, at least that specific job. I could see him coming in and overtaking Elliott Wolf. Now, I think ideally the Crafts would like Elliott Wolf and his grading system to stick around and work with Vrabel.
I wouldn't move on from Elliott Wolf if I were them. I've said that from the beginning.
Yeah, and if maybe would he take a demotion to a director of scouting or something like that for a year or two and then go be a GM somewhere else? I think that is on the table as well. If Vrabel goes to them and he says, Cowden's my guy at GM, I don't want to work with Wolf, or I want Wolf to get demoted, I think they would acquiesce to Mike Vrabel. And I think he already knows that. To your point, I think he knows that going in, that whoever's in charge of personnel is either going to be his guy or someone here that he knows he can work with and he believes in. So I think ideally the Crafts want Elliott Wolf to stay, but I do wonder if there could be some maneuverability in what his exact title and what his exact responsibilities are.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think he takes the job if he doesn't have a sense that he's going to have a say in terms of who's in the front office, or like I said earlier, if he doesn't have some control of the roster. Why would you if you're him? If you're going to go into a situation where you're going to be married with someone that you haven't worked with in the past, that you don't really have a relationship with, he could go somewhere else and dictate terms. Now, of course, if he ends up in a Chicago, he'd have to work with a Ryan Poles, or New York would probably be the best landing spot for him other than the Patriots, because they also have a GM opening. They could have potentially paired him with who he wants. But I think at the end of the day, he knew he was going to get everything he wanted here, and that's ultimately why he decided to come here. We mentioned this at the start of the show, John, and again, you are watching this Patriots Pulse special. Mike Vrabel is the new Patriots coach. They will be introducing him tomorrow at a noon press conference, which is crazy to me that it breaks today. They're wasting no time. I think the groundwork for this was laid before the season was over, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think they had this in the back of their minds. I think they had it in the back of their minds all year, but I think it really heated up after they lost to Arizona coming out of the bye week.
I was told that bye week was the pivot point. It was the pivot point in terms of the direction of the franchise, and I think that you're right. I think that that's when he decided, you know what? We need to make a change here, and we need to do everything we can to get Mike Vrabel here. And I think once the Jets stepped up and interviewed Vrabel right before the season finale last week against Buffalo, I think that expedited their process. And you know what? Look, last year they introduced Gerard Mayo on January 17th. Now you're talking January 13th, not a full week earlier, but certainly earlier. This illustrates that they just want to get to work and get this thing turned around. They want to start getting ready for the draft. They want to start getting ready for free agency. He needs to assemble his staff. So there's a lot of moving parts in this, obviously. Kraft doesn't want to waste any time. He wants to get the ball rolling, and rightfully so. There's definitely a sense of urgency there. You are watching this Patriots Pulse special. Mike Vrabel is the new Patriots coach. I'm your host, John Serenitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, John Lyons. Feel free to join the conversation. We would love to hear from you guys, your thoughts on Mike Vrabel being named the new Patriots coach. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Were you hoping for Ben Johnson? Why or why not? Were you hoping for someone else? We'd love to hear from you. We're going to be on here about another 10 to 15 minutes, so feel free to jump on and join the show. John, one of the things that's been talked about really throughout the entire weekend, or at the very least since they interviewed Vrabel and then Ben Johnson on Friday, is the process. Are you happy with their process? Should it have been a wider search, a more broader process, or you're okay with it because ultimately they got the guy they wanted?
So I love the result. I'm not happy with the process overall. And you look at the Patriots, Pete Carroll's really the last guy they did a coaching search for because they knew they wanted Belichick. They traded for him. Mayo is a successor already in his contract. So this was their first opportunity since the mid-90s to do a head coaching search. And I just would have liked them to talk to a couple more guys. Like Byron Leftwich and Pep Hamilton were not real candidates. Like I would have and
they were simply to meet the Rooney Rule.
Yeah, which I think that kind of sucks in itself. And like if you want to talk
to them,
the rule
sucks.
But if you want to talk to them, talk to Brian Flores, talk to Marcus Freeman. There's other, I think, more qualified minority coaches they could have talked to. And they talked to Ben Johnson, which was good. Obviously, Vrabel was the guy. They didn't need to interview 10 guys or 12 guys, but I would have liked to have seen 5 or 6, maybe 1 or 2 other guys just from outside the Patriots organization who, even if Vrabel was their guy, maybe that 1 or 2 guys from outside the organization tells them something they hadn't thought of before. Or, hey, this is how we used to game plan against you. You might think wide receiver is your biggest issue, but for us, it was, your right tackle play wasn't good enough or vice versa, whatever. I think that could have been really valuable. So I didn't love the process. I do love the result though. So.
Yeah, I see the value in the process, but again, that they're privately owned companies in essence. I mean, other than the Green Bay Packers, the other 31 teams in the league are owned by individuals. And so, other than meeting the Rooney Rule requirement, which they've made a sham of, but then again, the entire league has made a sham of it. Let's be honest.
Technically, they met it, but I agree.
They met it, right? They interviewed 2 candidates, but the rule is a sham. And I've said this forever, John, and I know it's an unpopular opinion. I have no problem to me, it's one thing to require that they interview minority candidates, but the rule is a sham because the rule is set up for owners to skirt it. It's set up so that they can identify the coach they want, hone in on them. Then you bring in the minority candidates, and let's face it, sadly, there's always going to be people that are going to be willing to interview because they want the experience and they want to put themselves out there. So you're always going to get minority candidates to interview, but unless you tighten the screws with this rule and enforce it more and maybe even mandate, which is, again, hard to do because these are private entities, unless you figure out a way to mandate that they have to hire a minority head coach, the rule is always going to be a sham. So you might as well do away with it and continue to give opportunities to minority candidates to grow and develop into roles and hope that owners down the road are more willing to hire them. But at the end of the day, everybody and their mother knew that Byron Leftwich, who came out of left field as a head coaching interview, and Pep Hamilton his most recent experience has been in the XFL. Those guys aren't going to – people knew they weren't legitimate candidates. The whole league did. But the rule is set up.
I think it's a perspective thing, and they did it. Like, again, I love the result. I'm glad you got Vrabel. I was just hoping for a couple more perspectives on just how other people view your organization. And it's, again, I was just hoping for that. I thought the process, especially since, again, they didn't interview anybody last year. They hadn't hired a head coach before last year since January of 2000. So it had been such a long time. I was hoping for a little bit more in-depth of a process. But as we said at the beginning of the show, I think they were keen on Vrabel 12 months ago, and they stuck with Mayo. Yep. And when Mayo didn't work out, Vrabel was the guy they probably looked at and said, man, we should have hired him a year ago, and they weren't going to miss that opportunity this time.
No. Now, as far as staff is concerned, because everybody's out there, and I'm guilty of this too. I mean, I'm so glad this is over because, I mean, people have just come undone the last few days on X about who they're going to hire and who's going to be on the staff and this and that. And it's a race to get information out first. Unfortunately, that's what the media world has become now. But who are, in your opinion, who are some people you would like to see on the staff? We can bandy about names, which is fine. We're here to inform the fans. But who are some people that you'd like to see on this staff? Like, of course, Josh McDaniels' name has been prominently mentioned all weekend long as a potential offensive coordinator candidate. I don't think that's a fait accompli like most people think it is. I'm sure that might be the Kraft's preference, but I'm not so sure Vrabel is on board with that. Ultimately, this is going to be his hire, but let's start there. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball. Where do you want to see them go at offensive coordinator? Because Drake May's development into a franchise quarterback is the biggest thing that needs to be accomplished here other than turning the team around.
Yeah, so I would love a McDaniels hire. I think his offense is really fun to watch. I think there's areas of it that could maybe be streamlined a little bit, which is what the Patriots tried to do in 2022. They just picked the wrong guys to do it in Patricia and Judge, but he's got a proven track record of being a high-level offensive coordinator, proven track record of developing and improving quarterbacks, and he's not going to leave in a year. There's going to be continuity there. So I think that's a big selling point. I'd be open to keeping Alex Van Pelt around, whether they want to keep him at OC or maybe demote him to quarterbacks coach if he'd be open to it, because I do think Drake May and Joe Milton's development was the best part of the offense this year, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. Nick Caley's a guy I would be open to as well. I think he could do a good job maybe blending some of the Rams stuff he's done the last few years with some of the Patriots stuff he did here when he won 2 Super Bowls. That might be a fun little blend. He has not called plays before, so that's something to keep in mind. And 2 other names, Sean, and these are more maybe long shots, but I'd call them if I were Mike Vrabel, is Lincoln Riley and Lane Kiffin. If he wants to dip into the college ranks, 2 guys that have been innovative in college, develop quarterbacks well in college, I'd be open to talking. Though, again, those guys are more long shots, but I might want to at least talk to them if I'm Mike Vrabel at OC. But I think McDaniels, to me, I agree with you, it's not a fait accompli, but I think he's the front runner, followed by Van Pelt, Caley, and then maybe a couple wild cards.
Yeah, one of the downsides of hiring a defensive coach, a defensive guy as your head coach, is that if you hire an offensive coordinator who has success, they're gone within a year or 2. And you're going to have constant turnover at arguably your most important coordinator position. One of the reasons I've been pushing Josh McDaniels is not so much because I'm looking into the past and he was a part of the a system that won 6 Super Bowls, and he coordinated 3 of those Super Bowl teams. The reason I'm pushing for him, one, is familiarity, but also, 2, and more importantly, is he's going to stick around. I don't think, even if they have success, I'm not so sure after getting 2 shots at being a head coach if he's going to get a 3rd opportunity. And I'm not so sure he wants to move his family around again. Now, of course, all weekend long, I've been going back and forth with people about the offense, and it's too static and too stagnant, and there's not enough motion and not enough RPOs. Everybody loves RPOs because RPOs win you Super Bowls, apparently. But the bottom line for me is I want Josh McDaniels to come back because I think that system works. I think that Drake May can fit that system. I think if you tweak the system a little bit in terms of dress things up a little bit more, maybe you incorporate more zone read, bluff read stuff, built in some RPOs, add some of that element to that base offense, I think you have a pretty good system. And I think the most important thing here to keep in mind is quarterback development. And you hit the nail on the head. Yes, he had Tom Brady all those years. Fine, I get it. But in 2008, Brady gets hurt, blows out his knee. They won 11 games with Matt Castle. He was the offensive coordinator. 2021, Mac Jones' best season of his career, throws 23 touchdown passes. He developed him. So
I would also add, too, the Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Brissett development. Let's not forget the first 4 games of 2016. Yeah, they go 3-1 those first 4 games. And again, I know it was only 4 games, but we all remember how good Garoppolo looked those first 2 weeks before he got injured. I think McDaniels was a big reason for that. Then they changed the offense on the fly with Jacoby Brissett. And I know Jerry Shulpinski deserves a lot of credit for that development as well. But it's not just like, oh, he had Brady. Like, of course, he had Brady, and that's why they won Super Bowls. I get it. But he developed several other young quarterbacks with fewer skills than Brady and still got them to at least reach their ceiling. I mean, the best Mac Jones ever played was the middle of that 2021 season, right? The best Matt Castle ever played was 2008. So the best Jimmy Garoppolo probably ever played was those first 2 weeks of 2016. No disrespect to the year he went to the Super Bowl. But I just think he's got this track record of working with young guys that is worth noting.
Not only is it worth noting, but go back to 2020. Brady leaves, goes to Tampa. They end up adding Cam Newton in June of that year. And I thought he did a really nice job that year. I know they went 7-9 and they struggled at times on offense, but I thought he did a really nice job. And this is where I would say to Patriot fans, if you have reservations of him potentially adapting and changing to fit Drake May's skill set, go back to 2020. In that 2020 season, I thought he did a really nice job adapting the scheme to Cam Newton's skill set and getting more out of him. So I definitely think McDaniels can do this. And I know a lot has been made about him visiting college programs and studying those offenses this season that he was out of football. And yes, that's important. That's what good coaches do, by the way.
I think
if you're not coaching, I mean, I haven't coordinated in 4 years. I still draw plays every day. I still visit with coaches and talk X's and O's and try to keep myself up to date on what's going on in the game. Not because I want another opportunity necessarily, but because I love the game and I want to stay on top of it because I talk about it. So that's a good thing that he did that. But in terms of other candidates, I mentioned Tommy Rees last week. I do think he's in play. He's a rising star in the NFL coaching ranks. I've talked to a lot of people that really like him, that have worked with him both at Notre Dame, Alabama, and with the Cleveland Browns this year. I think he's a possibility. If there's changes in Pittsburgh, Arthur Smith could be a potential possibility. As far as the rest of the staff is concerned, he coached in Cleveland with Chad O'Shea. And let's not forget, Chad O'Shea,
I'd be open to Chad coming back.
He spent a bunch of years here during the good years coaching receivers and working with the passing game. He's a possibility. Bo Hardigree, who coached with him in Tennessee, has Patriot ties. Possibility. You mentioned AVP. Maybe he's open to staying as a quarterbacks coach. Who knows? I doubt that, though. I think most of that staff will probably move on. He's got a lot of guys that coach with him in Tennessee that are still in the league that would probably be willing to coach with him, including Shane Bowen, who was a position coach for him and then defensive coordinator. Of course, Bowen was with the Giants last year as their DC. He could be a potential DC. And then there are other guys out there that are just, like a guy like Lou Anarumo, who has local ties. He's coached college football in New England. He could potentially be a guy that could be in play for their defensive coordinator position. I know a lot of people have talked about Robert Saleh. I think he goes back to San Francisco personally. But look, the bottom line is I think he's going to have a lot of options. And I do think there'll be some retention. I could see some of the guys, a guy like Taylor Embry staying, potentially doing the running backs. Maybe the Belichick. I don't think Brian Belichick stays, but maybe Mike Pellegrino stays.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah, there's some. I think there'll be some retention, but I do think you're going to see a lot of new faces as well. Again, I would be shocked if they did the whole beer, wine, and cheese thing again to introduce the staff to the media. I don't see that happening. But I think there'll be some familiar names that get added to the staff, but there'll also be some guys that will probably be retained. I would think he's probably got his ducks in a row with that. I mean, at any level of football nowadays, if you're a candidate for a head coaching job, whether it be high school, college, or the NFL, the number one question that decision makers ask is, do you have a staff? So you got to get those ducks in a row before you even interview, really. I would think he's got guys lined up, or at least he has guys that he has in mind that could potentially coach certain positions. Before we go here, I wanted to ask you a question I think is going to come up a lot this offseason is first-year expectations for Mike Vrabel. We knew last year was going to be a bridge year for the Patriots, that they were, in essence, punting on it. If they went 5-12, 6-11, 7-10, would have been a good year. And let's face it, John, if they win 6-11, 7-10, Gerard Mayo is probably still here. That being said, what are your expectations for year one for Mike Vrabel? It's never too early to talk expectations, as you know.
Yeah, I think they should win 3 to 4 more games. So I think you're looking at a 7-10, 8-9 season because I think Vrabel and his staff is going to be an upgrade over Mayo and his staff. I expect Drake May to continue to develop, and all this cap space, the actual cash they have to spend, their draft capital, they should be able to add some significant pieces to this roster. And I'm not saying it's going to be a total overhaul like 2021 was or 06 to 07 was, but they should be able to add multiple significant pieces to this roster. And you look at some of those close games they lost, if you have better coaching against Seattle, say in week 2, that Miami home game, you have another piece or two on offense in those games, you probably win those games with Gerard Mayo. The Rams game as well, right? The Bills game that you had, 3 turnovers in the second half, you probably win those games. So I expect 3 to 4 more wins with the caveat of they're probably going to improve the roster significantly as well.
Yeah, I think the roster is going to improve significantly. He makes that much of a difference in terms of the roster. I think he's going to attract free agents here as long as they're willing to spend. And I would imagine, again, in his conversations with Kraft, this probably came up. We all know the Patriots and their spending of real cash. I think that they're going to have to spend now. I think that after this 5-year stretch, they don't have a choice. And if it means that you have some cap issues down the road, then so be it. Look, Bob Kraft is in his early to mid, going into his mid-80s here. If he wants to see another Super Bowl run or potential Super Bowl run, they're going to have to open up the vault and give Vrabel the combination here. I think a realist look, I'll say this, and people have compared them to potentially having a similar turnaround than we saw this year with the LA Chargers. I think that that's fair. I don't know if they win 11 games, but I think 9-8, 10-7 is on the table because here's the thing. If they play similar to the way the Chargers did, where they run the football and then they upgrade a wide receiver, upgrade an offensive line, and they push the ball down the field vertically a little bit more, they're going to be much better on offense. They certainly have the quarterback to do that. But the other piece of it here is if they fix the defense, if they upgrade at certain spots, edge rusher, corner, if they upgrade at those spots and they coach those guys up a little bit better, I think that this is a team next year, John, that can win 9 games and be in playoff contention, potentially win 10 and get in the playoffs. And look, if you get into the playoffs next year, let's say at 9-8, 10-7, Mike Vrabel's first year, that's a pretty damn good year, and that's a pretty good foundation moving forward. So I think it's going to be a fascinating offseason when it comes to the New England Patriots. Again, they are scheduled to announce Mike Vrabel as the team's new head football coach tomorrow at noon, wasting no time. And sorry, Bruins and Celtics fans, but the Patriots are going to hijack the offseason. The Bruins and the Celtics are going to pretty much be irrelevant until playoff time. Patriots are going to be the number one story in this market. And I hate to say it to the Red Sox fans as well. It's going to be all Patriots all the time this offseason. Hopefully all of their effort this offseason leads to a better product next year. and they get back into contention. Final thoughts here, John, before we wrap it up.
Yeah, final thoughts are the Patriots got themselves, I think, a great head coach. And I think that's a great step forward for the organization. They are going to be a better coach team next year. You and I, of course, will see that on our post-game shows all of next season. I'm already putting the reservation in now, but they are going to be a better coach team next year. That answers one question. The other looming question is they need to do multiple things to improve this roster. So step one is complete. We're going to spend the offseason talking about step two. If they do that, they are going to have a much better football team next season. But I'm really happy with this hire. Again, you have yourselves a great head coach, and Patriots fans should be happy about that.
Look, I tweeted this out earlier, and of course on Twitter, you're going to, unfortunately, a lot of the content you put out, and you know this, John, you're going to get a lot of stupid responses from people. You're also going to get a lot of great feedback, which is why I think Twitter or X or whatever the hell we're calling it nowadays is fantastic, because a lot of the feedback I've gotten from fans this week has been awesome. It's well thought out, and we appreciate that. So keep it coming. We love talking football with you guys. But for me, I said this, and I'm going to try this as a family show. I try not to use foul language, but I'm going to make an exception here. He's a fucking tone setter, plain and simple. And that's what you need in the NFL. And this is not a knock on Gerard Mayo. He was a hell of a player. He's a good man, and he deserves another opportunity. And you can make the argument he deserved a longer opportunity here. All of that being said, Mike Vrabel is a tone setter. He's a prick. He's going to get after it from day one. You're going to know where you stand. Him coaching guys at pro days and him coaching guys wearing the chest pad, that's not for show. That's who he is. He's a hands-on guy. He knows what he wants. He knows what he wants out of his players, both physically and mentally. And he places expectations on them and his coaches. And the expectation is that you're going to rise to the occasion every single day you're in the building. I think that's the kind of guy they got here. Now, does that mean they're going to go back to the Super Bowl? No, but the difference, I think, between a Vrabel and a Belichick is simple. He played. He's a 3-time Super Bowl champion. He has the respect of the owner. He has the respect of people around the league. And he knows what he wants. And ultimately, that's why he was such a popular head coaching candidate in this cycle, because other owners saw the same things that Robert Kraft did. So I love this hire. Ben Johnson, I think, would have been a good hire, but ultimately I agree with most people's thought that they couldn't go back to the first-time head coach well. I think they needed to get someone with experience. Not only do you get that, but you get a guy that won championships here. He understands the Patriot way. He wants to be here, and he understands what it's going to take to get this franchise back into contender status. So I think it's a great day for Patriot fans. I think there are better days ahead. People just have to be patient. But I think this is a good first start. I think Mike Vrabel is going to do a hell of a job here. And if he doesn't, then you and I will have pie on our face, and we'll be, hopefully, God willing, we'll be talking about this 2 or 3 years again down the road. Who knows? But in any event, John, I want to thank you for taking the time. I know that it's not easy in this day and age to carve out time to do this, but, we like to deliver the content, and we want to inform Patriot fans. So I appreciate your time, brother.
Hey, no problem. And like I said, I think our post-game shows this year going to be a little bit more fun than the past season.
Oh, yeah. The thing is, he is going to be so different in his handling of the media. It is going to be fascinating to watch because, again, I don't think he's Belichick. He's going to give you more than Belichick, but that Parcells comp, I think, is very true with him. It'll be fascinating. Of course, we'll have full coverage of tomorrow's press conference as well, and we'll get the ball rolling here with the NFL draft as well. So, for this, that'll be it for this Patriots Pulse special. For John Lyons, I'm John Sirenitas. We'll talk to you next time. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy,